The sun was just starting to set over the city, casting a warm golden glow across the streets. In the heart of the busy district, a grand mansion stood tall, its walls gleaming with wealth and power. Inside, the air was cool and polished, carrying the faint scent of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. The mansion belonged to one of the richest men in the country, a person whose influence reached far beyond the city itself. He was known for being difficult and demanding, often testing people just to see how they would react under pressure. In a small part of the city, far from the luxury of this mansion, a young woman lived in a modest apartment. Her life was simple and quiet. She worked during the day at a local music school, teaching children and helping with small concerts, while she practiced her own music in the evenings. She had always loved the piano. Its keys felt like an extension of her own thoughts and emotions, a way to express feelings she sometimes could not put into words. Her talent was remarkable, but she never sought fame or recognition. Music was her passion, not a way to show off. One afternoon, a letter arrived at her apartment, delivered in a thick envelope sealed with wax. She opened it with curiosity, finding an invitation to the mansion. The letter spoke in formal words, inviting her to perform at a private gathering. The signature at the bottom made her heart skip a beat. It was from the billionaire himself. She had heard of him, of course. Many people had, though few had ever met him. Stories of his wealth and power surrounded him, some admiring, some fearful. The thought of stepping into his world both excited and worried her. She sat for a long time, holding the letter, thinking about what this invitation could mean. She had played in many recitals and small events, but nothing on this scale. Still, a quiet voice inside her encouraged her to go. After all, it was an opportunity to share her music, and perhaps, to challenge herself in ways she had never imagined. Taking a deep breath, she decided to accept. The next few days were filled with preparation. She practiced the piano relentlessly, moving her fingers over the keys as if she were trying to speak through them. The music was her world, her safe space, and now it felt as though it carried a new weight. She wondered what kind of audience she would face, and what the billionaire would expect. Would he be kind? Would he even notice her playing? Questions swirled in her mind, but she reminded herself that her purpose was clear: to play, and to play with all her heart. On the day of the gathering, she dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, hoping to present herself with respect without drawing unnecessary attention. As she approached the mansion, its gates loomed over her, grand and intimidating. She walked up the driveway, her heart pounding in her chest. Each step brought her closer to a world she had only seen in magazines and stories. The front doors opened before she could even knock, and she was greeted by a butler who nodded politely and led her inside. The mansion was more magnificent than she had imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, their light reflecting off polished marble floors. Paintings and sculptures filled every corner, each one telling a story of wealth, culture, and history. She felt small and out of place, but she reminded herself that she was here for a reason. The music she carried in her heart was not bound by walls or wealth. Finally, she was led to a large room where a grand piano stood in the center. The space was designed to impress, with high ceilings, large windows, and furniture that looked more like art than practical objects. She could see the billionaire sitting across the room, his posture straight, eyes sharp, an expression unreadable. He was even more imposing in person, and she felt a twinge of nervousness. Yet, beneath the surface of her anxiety, there was also a spark of determination. She had worked hard for this moment, and she would not let fear stop her. He spoke first, his voice calm but with a subtle edge that made it clear he was testing her. "I've heard you play, and I wanted to see it for myself. Please, sit and show me what you can do." There was a faint smirk on his face, one that made her suspect he might not be entirely sincere in his praise. Nevertheless, she nodded, walking gracefully toward the piano. Her hands hovered over the keys, and she closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only her and the music she was about to create. When she began to play, the first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but quickly grew into something more confident and flowing. She played with feeling, each chord carrying a part of her story, her struggles, and her dreams. As the music filled the room, she noticed the billionaire leaning slightly forward, his eyes narrowing as he listened. She could not read his thoughts, but she could feel his presence, heavy and expectant. The young woman did not rush. She allowed the music to breathe, to move naturally from one note to the next. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and emotion, telling a story that words could never capture. Outside, the city carried on with its noise and bustle. But inside this room, time seemed to slow. The only thing that mattered was the melody she created, the connection between her heart and the instrument. As she played, she began to feel a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. This was more than just a performance. It was a challenge to herself and to the man watching her. She did not need his approval, but she could sense that he had underestimated her. The thought gave her a quiet strength. She would show him, not with words, but with the language she knew best, music. Minutes passed like hours, each note resonating in the grand room. The young woman poured everything into her performance, letting go of any lingering doubts or fears. She felt a freedom she had never experienced before, as if the piano had become a part of her being. And somewhere deep in her focus, she sensed a change in the billionaire's demeanor. The smirk that had been there at the beginning was gone, replaced by a look of curiosity and, perhaps, surprise. When the last note finally faded, silence filled the room. It was not the awkward silence of disappointment or tension, but a heavy, almost reverent pause. The young woman sat with her hands folded on her lap, breathing steadily, waiting for some reaction. The billionaire remained quiet for a moment, as though he were processing what he had just heard. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, a faint nod acknowledging her performance. For the first time, she felt a shift in the atmosphere. The room no longer felt intimidating. It felt like a place where talent and passion could be recognized, even by someone who had the power to control so much else in the world. The young woman smiled softly to herself, knowing that no matter what happened next, she had already achieved something important. She had faced the challenge, shared her gift, and remained true to herself. That evening marked the beginning of something neither of them had expected. For her, it was a confirmation of her own strength and talent. For him, it was the first hint that appearances could be deceiving, and that sometimes, even those who seem most insignificant can leave a lasting impression. As she left the room, the faint echo of the piano followed her, a reminder that music could speak louder than words and touch hearts in ways nothing else could. The next morning, the young woman woke up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness still lingering in her chest. Her mind kept returning to the events of the previous evening, the grandeur of the mansion, the intimidating presence of the billionaire, and the sound of her own music still echoed in her ears. She had survived the first encounter, but she knew the real test might be yet to come. The invitation had not mentioned exactly what would happen after her performance, leaving her to imagine countless possibilities. She spent the early hours at her small apartment, practicing at the piano she had known for years. Her fingers moved over the familiar keys, each note bringing a sense of comfort and focus. Even though she had played the piece perfectly the night before, she wanted to be ready for anything the billionaire might ask. He had a reputation for testing people, not just for their talent, but for their composure and character. She couldn't afford to underestimate him or herself. By late morning, she dressed carefully, choosing simple but elegant clothing that allowed her to feel confident, without drawing unnecessary attention. As she left her apartment, she noticed the city bustling with energy. People hurried along the streets, unaware of the small dramas and triumphs unfolding in their midst. She felt both connected and distant from them, as though she were stepping into a world where the rules were different, a world where wealth and power shaped expectations. When she arrived at the mansion again, the gates opened automatically, and a familiar butler guided her inside. The hallway seemed even more imposing during the day, sunlight streaming through tall windows and casting long shadows across the marble floors. Paintings, sculptures, and luxurious furnishings filled every corner, reminding her that she was far from the simple life she had known. Yet, she kept her head high, determined not to let the opulence intimidate her. She was led to the piano room, where the grand instrument waited as if anticipating her return. The billionaire was already there, seated with his usual calm but authoritative demeanor. He did not greet her with warmth, but with a subtle, challenging look that seemed to measure her every movement. His eyes were sharp, studying her as she approached, and she could feel the weight of his expectations pressing down on her. This time, it was clear that he was not just curious. He wanted to see how she would respond under pressure. He spoke first, his voice steady but slightly teasing. "I am glad you came again. Today, I want you to play something different, something more complex. I am curious to see if your talent truly matches the stories I have heard." There was a faint smirk on his face, as if he believed he was setting a trap that she could not escape. The young woman nodded politely, her heart racing. She did not respond with words. Instead, she let her determination speak through her posture and her calm expression. She took a deep breath and approached the piano, fingers hovering over the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the silence of the room and the expectations surrounding her settle into focus. She reminded herself that music was her ally, a language that could convey strength, emotion, and authenticity all at once. When she began to play, the first notes were deliberate, each one measured but infused with feeling. She chose a piece that was intricate, with rapid scales and delicate passages that demanded both precision and passion. Her fingers moved fluidly, almost dancing across the keys, while her mind remained focused on the music itself. Every chord, every crescendo, every subtle pause carried a piece of her story, a reflection of her life's struggles and joys. The billionaire watched intently, his initial smirk fading as the performance unfolded. He leaned forward slightly, arms crossed, eyes narrowing not in arrogance but in concentration. Something about her playing was different this time. It was not just skill, but depth and emotion. He realized that the young woman was not simply performing a piece of music. She was communicating, telling a story that he could feel even if he could not put it into words. As the music flowed, the young woman felt a surge of confidence. She had prepared herself, but she also allowed herself to let go of fear. The mansion, the billionaire, and the expectations surrounding her faded into the background. All that remained was the piano and the music that seemed to pour naturally from her fingers. She added subtle improvisations, small touches that showcased not only her technical ability, but also her creativity. Each note was deliberate, yet spontaneous, a reflection of her unique voice as a musician. Minutes passed, each one filled with tension, beauty, and intensity. The room, which had felt intimidating moments ago, seemed to transform. The sound of the piano created a space where emotions were free to move, where presence and vulnerability intertwined. The billionaire, for all his wealth and experience, appeared caught off guard. His expression shifted from curiosity to something resembling genuine admiration. The young woman could not see his thoughts, but she sensed a change in the energy of the room, a shift from skepticism to respect. By the time she reached the final measures of the piece, she felt a sense of triumph. She had challenged herself, faced the scrutiny of someone powerful, and expressed herself fully through her music. Her fingers lifted from the keys as the last note lingered in the air, and for a moment, there was complete silence. The sound of the city outside seemed distant, irrelevant, as if the room existed in its own world, shaped entirely by the music she had created. The billionaire remained quiet for a moment, studying her calmly. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, a subtle smile appearing on his face. It was not a smile of condescension, but one of acknowledgement. He had seen her talent, her courage, and her authenticity. For the first time, he seemed to recognize that skill and character could exist in someone who, in other circumstances, might have been dismissed or underestimated. The young woman remained seated, breathing steadily, her hands resting gently on her lap. She did not need a verbal confirmation. The acknowledgement in his eyes and the shift in the room were enough. She had met the challenge not by trying to impress or please, but by staying true to herself and her music. That alone felt like a victory. After a few moments, he spoke, his voice calmer and more measured than before. "Your talent is extraordinary. I underestimated you, and I see now that the stories were not exaggerations." There was no mockery in his tone, only respect. The young woman nodded politely, a quiet sense of satisfaction rising within her. She had faced a difficult situation and emerged with her dignity intact, her gift recognized. As she left the piano room that day, she felt a new sense of confidence. The experience had shown her that talent could not be judged by appearances or social status. It was a reminder that her dedication, hard work, and authenticity were more valuable than any external validation. Outside, the city continued its rush, but she walked with a calm awareness of her own strength and potential. The encounter at the mansion marked a turning point. She understood that the billionaire, for all his wealth and influence, was also human, capable of admiration, surprise, and growth. For her, the lesson was clear. True expression, courage, and authenticity could command respect, even in the most intimidating circumstances. And as she disappeared into the city streets, the echo of her music lingered, a testament to her determination and the beginning of a story that neither she nor the billionaire could yet fully predict. The evening arrived with a soft glow, painting the city's skyline in shades of orange and pink. The young woman found herself once again standing before the gates of the grand mansion. She felt a mix of anticipation and curiosity. The first two encounters had tested her resolve and skill, But she could not predict what awaited her tonight. She walked up the driveway, her steps measured, her mind focused on the music she carried within her. Every visit seemed to pull her deeper into a world she had once only dreamed of, a world that demanded more than talent. It demanded courage, presence, and heart. The mansion welcomed her with the same imposing presence, yet there was a subtle difference in the air. Perhaps it was the memory of her previous performances, or maybe it was the billionaire himself, now watching her with something closer to respect than judgment. The butler led her through the familiar hallways, and she noticed the faint glow of chandeliers reflecting on the marble floors. The environment remained overwhelming, but she felt more centered. The piano room awaited her, the grand instrument gleaming in the soft light, as if anticipating her return. When she entered the room, she saw the billionaire sitting in his usual position, eyes fixed on her, observing. Tonight, however, there was no smirk or subtle challenge in his expression. Instead, his gaze held curiosity, as though he genuinely wanted to experience what she had to offer. This small change gave her a sense of reassurance. She was not here merely to survive an evaluation. She was here to share, to express herself freely. He spoke first, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made her attentive. "I have been thinking about what I heard from you. I want you to play something that tells your story, something personal, not just a rehearsed piece." The request startled her slightly. Most people, even those who appreciated music, rarely asked for authenticity. They often expected perfection. But here, he was asking for truth, raw and unfiltered. She nodded, understanding that this was not a trap, but a genuine invitation to reveal her heart through her music. She approached the piano, her hands lightly touching the polished keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting memories and emotions rise to the surface. She thought of quiet evenings at her apartment, the hours spent practicing, the small victories and frustrations that had shaped her journey. She thought of the children she taught, the joy of seeing them discover their own voices. All of this became the foundation of the story she was about to tell with her music. The first notes emerged gently, almost like a whisper. They carried a tenderness that immediately filled the room with a sense of intimacy. She played with intention, each chord reflecting a fragment of her experiences. The billionaire remained silent, yet she could feel him leaning forward, drawn into the narrative. Her music was no longer just a display of skill. It was a conversation, a bridge connecting to people from different worlds through emotion and expression. As the piece progressed, her confidence grew. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, letting subtle imperfections and flourishes emerge naturally. Each note carried weight and meaning, telling a story of perseverance, hope, and resilience. She moved seamlessly between soft passages and more intense sections, creating a rhythm that mirrored the ebb and flow of her own life. Her fingers danced with both precision and freedom, and the piano seemed to respond to her touch as though it were alive, echoing her feelings back to the room. The billionaire's reaction was gradual. At first, he listened with curiosity, trying to anticipate her next move. But soon, the surprise became evident in the way he relaxed into his chair, how his eyes softened, and how his expression revealed a deep appreciation. He had expected talent, yes, but not this level of authenticity and emotion. The music bypassed pretense and entered a space where judgment was unnecessary. He was witnessing something rare, a person sharing themselves wholly and without reservation. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, though neither of them noticed the passage of time. The young woman became fully immersed in the music, letting intuition guide her fingers. She added small improvisations, delicate nuances that gave the piece a unique personality. Every chord she struck carried a story, every pause allowed reflection, and every crescendo built an emotional arc that left the room suspended in the moment. The mansion's grandeur, the billionaire's presence, all faded into the background. Only the piano and the music existed, binding them together in a shared experience. As she approached the final section of the performance, the music grew more intense, filled with emotion and unspoken meaning. It was not about impressing anyone anymore. It was about truth and connection. Her fingers moved effortlessly, yet purposefully, creating a climax that carried both strength and vulnerability. The billionaire, who had seen countless displays of talent and wealth, seemed captivated, as if the music had pierced through the barriers that money and power had built around him. The last note lingered in the air, a soft echo that seemed to settle over the room like a gentle sigh. Silence followed, profound and complete. The young woman lowered her hands, her chest rising and falling with quiet relief and satisfaction. She had given herself fully to the music, and the experience had transcended performance. It was a moment of pure expression, shared in a way that words could never capture. The billionaire remained still, absorbing what he had witnessed. Slowly, he rose from his chair, walking toward her with measured steps. There was no need for applause or praise. The acknowledgement in his eyes spoke volumes. "That was remarkable," he said, his voice sincere and calm. "Not just for your skill, but for the honesty and emotion you put into it. I did not expect this, and I am grateful to have experienced it." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that few compliments ever did. It was a recognition not only of her talent, but also of her courage and authenticity. The young woman offered a small, humble smile. She did not seek approval, yet this acknowledgement mattered. It was a reminder that sharing one's true self, even in the presence of power and scrutiny, could be met with respect and understanding. She felt a warmth of confidence rising within her, knowing that she had met the challenge not by trying to conform or impress, but by staying true to her own voice. As she left the piano room that night, the mansion seemed less intimidating, and the city outside appeared more welcoming. The music she had played lingered in the hallways, a gentle reminder that expression and authenticity could create connections, even across the vast divide between wealth and simplicity. The encounter had changed something in both of them. For her, it was the affirmation of her own strength and talent. For him, it was a realization that greatness could manifest in forms beyond money, power, and status. The young woman walked back through the city streets, feeling a sense of calm and purpose. She had shared a part of herself that could never be measured by fame or fortune. The experience at the mansion was more than a test of skill. It was a lesson in courage, vulnerability, and the power of music to speak where words could not. She knew this was only the beginning, that her journey had opened doors not just in the world of the wealthy and powerful, but also within herself. The evening sky deepened to a rich, velvety blue, dotted with stars that mirrored the twinkling lights of the city below. She felt a quiet joy, knowing that the piano, her most loyal companion, had once again allowed her to convey her heart to someone who had expected to judge, not to listen. Tonight had proven that music had its own language, one that could reach across barriers and leave a lasting impression. And as she disappeared into the night, the faint echo of her performance lingered, a promise of more moments where talent, truth, and courage could change hearts in ways nothing else could. The young woman could feel the excitement and anticipation building. As she prepared to return to the mansion once again, her heart carried a mix of confidence and caution. The previous visits had tested her in ways she had not expected, revealing both her strength and the surprising depth of the billionaire's character. She understood that tonight would be different. The energy in the mansion seemed charged with curiosity, not challenge. She dressed simply but elegantly, choosing clothing that allowed her to move freely at the piano while presenting herself with dignity. As she walked up the familiar driveway, the gates opened almost instinctively, welcoming her into the world she had come to navigate with growing ease. The mansion's towering presence and opulent design no longer intimidated her in the same way. The chandeliers reflected light across the marble floors, and the subtle scent of flowers reminded her that beauty could exist even in grand, formal spaces. She felt prepared to face whatever awaited her tonight. Inside, the butler led her to the piano room, where the grand instrument stood under the soft glow of evening light. The billionaire was already present, seated in his usual position, but his expression was different. There was no trace of arrogance or expectation. Instead, there was a quiet attentiveness that seemed to acknowledge her previous performances and the courage it had taken to share herself. She nodded politely, and he gestured toward the piano with a calm invitation. "Tonight, I want you to play without restriction," he said, his voice steady but sincere. "Let the music come from your heart, not just your hands. Show me what you feel, not just what you know." His words struck her with both surprise and gratitude. Unlike previous encounters, this was not a test or a challenge. It was an opportunity to express herself freely. She understood that this was rare, especially in a world where power often overshadowed genuine emotion. She approached the piano and sat down, her fingers lightly brushing the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to breathe and center her mind. Memories, emotions, and unspoken thoughts flowed through her, each one ready to be transformed into sound. She began with gentle notes, soft and reflective, drawing the listener into her inner world. Each chord carried intention and meaning, creating a sense of intimacy in the grand, formal room. As the music progressed, she allowed herself to explore more complex expressions, Rapid passages alternated with delicate, sustained notes. There were moments of tension and release, echoes of struggle and triumph intertwined. She added subtle improvisations that reflected her personal journey, small victories, lessons learned, and dreams nurtured quietly in the solitude of practice. The piano responded to her touch as though it were an extension of her soul, amplifying the story she wanted to tell. The billionaire listened intently, his posture relaxed but his focus unwavering. There was no judgment in his gaze, only an appreciation for the depth and authenticity of her music. He had expected skill, perhaps even talent, but he had not anticipated this level of expression. Her music conveyed more than technical ability. It revealed courage, resilience, and the unspoken beauty of a life lived with dedication and integrity. Minutes passed, and the room seemed to hold its breath, suspended in the flow of music. She moved seamlessly through different emotions, each note carefully balanced between precision and freedom. The quiet moments allowed reflection, while the more intense passages conveyed energy and determination. She was no longer playing for an audience. She was sharing a piece of herself, unguarded and sincere. The experience was immersive, and for the first time, she felt completely connected to both the piano and the listener. The billionaire's expression softened further as he absorbed the performance. There was a shift in the room, subtle but profound. The tension that had been present in earlier visits was replaced by a shared understanding. Music had created a bridge between two worlds, the young woman's humble life of practice and dedication, and the billionaire's world of wealth, power, and expectation. In that moment, the barriers between them seemed to vanish, leaving only the beauty of genuine expression. As the performance reached its conclusion, the music swelled with emotion, building toward a powerful, resonant finale. She allowed herself to play fully, embracing the freedom and vulnerability that came with sharing her truth. The last notes lingered in the air, delicate yet firm, leaving the room in a profound silence. The young woman lifted her hands from the keys, breathing deeply, feeling both relief and satisfaction. She had given herself entirely to the music, and it had been received with openness and respect. The billionaire rose from his chair slowly, his movements deliberate and measured. He approached her with a calm presence, and for a moment, they shared a quiet, mutual acknowledgement. "You have shown me something remarkable tonight," he said, his voice sincere and steady. "Not just your skill, but your courage and authenticity. I underestimated you before, and now I see that the stories were true, and yet they only hint at the depth of your talent." His words were simple, yet they carried profound meaning. It was an acknowledgement not just of her music, but of her character and the strength she had demonstrated. The young woman nodded, feeling a warmth of satisfaction rise within her. She did not seek recognition, but it was reassuring to know that her dedication and honesty had been seen and appreciated. She understood that true talent was not measured solely by skill, but by the ability to convey emotion, to touch hearts, and to remain authentic in the face of pressure and expectation. As she left the piano room that night, the mansion seemed less imposing, almost welcoming in a way it had never been before. The music she had played lingered in the air, leaving a trace of beauty and connection that could not be erased. Outside, the city continued its ceaseless activity, but she walked with a calm awareness of her own strength and potential. Each step felt purposeful, grounded in the knowledge that she had faced challenges, shared her gift, and remained true to herself. The experience had left a lasting impression on both of them. For her, it was a reaffirmation of her own talent, courage, and resilience. For the billionaire, it was a lesson in humility, recognition, and the unexpected power of genuine expression. They had both changed in subtle but significant ways, bound by a shared experience that transcended social status, wealth, and expectation. As the evening sky deepened into night, dotted with stars that mirrored the city lights below, she felt a quiet joy. She had discovered the strength that came from authenticity and courage, and she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with music, growth, and new possibilities. The piano, her steadfast companion, had once again allowed her to express herself fully, creating a connection that words could never capture. And as she disappeared into the night, the faint echo of her performance lingered, a testament to the power of talent, sincerity, and human connection. The following morning arrived with a quiet calm. The young woman felt a mix of relief, pride, and anticipation as she prepared herself for what she knew could be the final encounter. At the mansion, each visit had been a journey, revealing layers of challenge, growth, and connection. Today, she understood that this experience was no longer just about proving her talent. It was about embracing the new opportunities and responsibilities that came with being seen and recognized by someone of great influence. She dressed simply, but with elegance, letting her attire reflect both respect for the occasion and her own personal style. As she stepped outside, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the quiet triumphs and struggles of those walking its streets. She took each step deliberately, reminding herself that her music had already spoken for her. What remained now was not to impress further, but to show herself fully, confidently, and authentically. The mansion welcomed her once again, its gates opening as if expecting her arrival. She walked up the familiar driveway, each step a reminder of the transformation she had experienced in such a short time. The grandeur of the building no longer intimidated her. It now felt like a stage set for the stories she had been sharing through her music. The halls, with their high ceilings and glittering chandeliers, seemed almost alive, resonating with the echoes of her past performances and the potential of what lay ahead. Inside, the butler guided her to the piano room, where the grand instrument awaited, shining under the warm light. The billionaire was already present, standing near the piano this time, rather than seated as before. His posture was relaxed, his expression curious but respectful. There was no trace of judgment, only a quiet anticipation that made her feel seen and acknowledged in a way that went beyond her skill on the piano. He spoke first, his voice calm and sincere. "I have watched you play these past days, and I must admit, your music has taught me something I did not expect to learn. Tonight, I would like you to play once more, not for me, but for yourself. Let your heart guide you, and let the music tell its own story." The request felt liberating. It was an invitation not to impress or perform under scrutiny, but to express freely and without limitation. She nodded, feeling a surge of confidence and clarity. As she approached the piano, she paused for a moment, letting her fingers hover over the keys. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, centering herself. The memories of her life, her journey with music, and the moments of quiet dedication came to her mind. Each one of these experiences would inform the performance, giving it depth and authenticity. She began softly, allowing the music to flow naturally, each note carrying a part of her story, a part of herself. The initial notes were gentle, almost like a conversation whispered into the air. The piano seemed to respond to her emotions, amplifying them with resonance and warmth. She moved seamlessly between soft passages and more powerful sections, creating a rhythm that reflected her journey, her hopes, and her quiet triumphs. Improvisations flowed naturally, reflecting her creativity and the depth of her personal experiences. It was music that could not be rehearsed, only felt and expressed. The billionaire watched quietly, moved by the depth and sincerity of her performance. There was no need for applause or commentary. His attentive presence spoke volumes. He had expected talent, yes, but what he witnessed now was something far more profound: authenticity, courage, and an ability to connect with others through art. He realized that the young woman had grown even more in these past days, and her music had become a reflection not only of her skill, but also of her spirit. Minutes passed, each one carrying a weight of emotion, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The young woman played with confidence, yet there was vulnerability in her expression that made the performance deeply human. She allowed herself to make subtle variations, small choices that conveyed her personality and experiences. Each chord, each pause, each delicate flourish was a testament to her growth, resilience, and the authenticity she had nurtured over time. The music swelled toward a climax, not as a display of virtuosity, but as a manifestation of her inner journey. She embraced the freedom of expression, fully allowing the piano to carry her emotions. The billionaire, for all his wealth and experience, seemed captivated, as if he were witnessing a revelation rather than a performance. The room itself seemed transformed, filled with the power of sincerity, human connection, and the beauty of shared experience. As the final notes faded into silence, a sense of completion and fulfillment settled over the room. The young woman lifted her hands from the keys and breathed deeply, feeling a quiet joy and satisfaction. She had not played to impress, to compete, or to be judged. She had played to share herself, and the result was a profound connection that transcended expectations, wealth, and social boundaries. The billionaire remained still for a moment, taking in the depth and authenticity of what he had witnessed. Slowly, he approached her, his steps deliberate but unhurried. "You have given me a gift beyond words," he said softly. "Not only your talent but your honesty, your courage, and your heart. I am grateful to have experienced this. It is rare to witness such true expression." The words were simple, yet they carried immense meaning. They acknowledged not only her skill, but her character and integrity, qualities that could not be measured by wealth or status. The young woman smiled quietly, her heart full. She felt a sense of empowerment and clarity that went beyond recognition. She understood that the journey she had embarked on was not just about the approval of others, but about discovering her own strength, voice, and potential. The mansion, the billionaire, and the grandeur of the world outside were now part of a larger story, one in which she had claimed her place with authenticity and grace. He continued, his tone thoughtful. I would like to offer you an opportunity to share your music more widely, to reach people who might not otherwise hear it. But the choice is yours. Your journey is yours alone, and I would never ask you to compromise your vision or integrity. The offer was generous, yet it came without pressure. It was an acknowledgement of her talent, yes, but also of her right to choose her path, to remain true to herself while exploring new possibilities. She considered the offer carefully, recognizing the weight of the decision. For a moment, she thought of her quiet apartment, her students, and the simple joy of playing music purely for the love of it. Then she thought of the potential to reach more people, to touch hearts beyond her immediate world. She realized that the choice did not have to be one or the other. She could expand her horizons while maintaining the authenticity and dedication that had brought her this far. With a calm and confident voice, she responded, "Thank you for the opportunity and for your respect. I would like to explore this path, but on my own terms, sharing my music in a way that remains true to who I am." The billionaire nodded, a subtle smile of understanding and approval on his face. He had witnessed not only her talent, but her discernment, independence, and the courage to remain herself in the face of new possibilities. As she left the mansion that evening, the city streets felt alive in a different way. The stars above mirrored the lights below, creating a sense of continuity and connection. She carried with her the experiences, lessons, and affirmations of the past days. She understood that recognition, opportunities, and challenges were part of the journey, but the true value lay in authenticity, courage, and the ability to touch hearts through sincere expression. The echo of the piano lingered in her mind, a reminder of her strength, dedication, and the transformative power of music. The billionaire had been a witness, a guide, and a catalyst, but the true triumph belonged to her, the young woman who had dared to share herself fully, who had faced challenges with grace, and who had emerged with confidence, authenticity, and the potential to shape her own future. The experience had changed them both, leaving a legacy of respect, admiration, and human connection that would resonate long after the last note had faded.